Billionaire's rules were clear: no curvy women. Until Black Curvy Woman walked in. A story about power, prejudice, and the heart's rebellion against its own rules. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to my channel where love conquers all and hearts find their way home. I hope you're having an amazing day, wherever you're watching from around the world. Drop a comment below and let me know what city or country you're tuning in from. I love connecting with my global family. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button because today's story will have you on the edge of your seat from start to finish. The executive assistant's hands trembled as she placed the resignation letter on Danny Corleone's mahogany desk. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 42nd floor, Manhattan sprawled beneath them like a conquered kingdom. But inside this sterile office, fear ruled supreme. "Sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the air conditioning. "I can't. I won't do this anymore." Danny didn't look up from his platinum laptop. His fingers, adorned with a single black signet ring, continued their methodical dance across the keyboard. The sound echoed like gunshots in the silence. "Can't do what, Ms. Peterson?" His voice carried the weight of glacial indifference. Sarah Peterson's breath hitched. She'd worked for Corleone Industries for 3 years, climbing from intern to executive assistant, and in all that time, she'd never questioned the unwritten rule. Until today. Until she watched him destroy another woman's dream with surgical precision. "The screening process," she managed, her words cracking like ice. "For the new positions. I can't keep turning away qualified candidates because they don't fit your preferences." Now Danny's fingers stilled. The silence stretched, taut as a wire about to snap. Slowly, deliberately, he closed the laptop and raised his eyes, steel gray and utterly ruthless. "My preferences," he repeated, each syllable sharp enough to cut glass, "built this empire. My preferences put food on your table and designer clothes on your back. My preferences are the only thing standing between order and chaos in this company." Sarah's resignation letter seemed to burn against the desktop. "But sir, some of these women are Harvard graduates, MIT engineers, Yale law." Distractions. The word sliced through her protest like a blade. Danny stood, his 6'3" frame casting a shadow across the desk. His tailored Italian suit fit him like armor, and his dark hair was perfectly styled despite the late hour. "Curvy women are distractions, Ms. Peterson. They disrupt focus. They breed office politics. They turn competent men into drooling idiots." The venom in his voice made Sarah step backward. She'd heard whispers about his past, fragments of rumors about a woman who'd destroyed everything he'd built from nothing. But she'd never seen the raw hatred that now burned in his eyes. "I've spent 15 years building Corleone Industries into the most successful investment firm on the East Coast," Danny continued, moving around the desk with predatory grace. 15 years eliminating every variable that could threaten that success. And curvy women, they are the most dangerous variable of all. Sarah's hand moved to her own curves, self-consciously smoothing her pencil skirt. "Sir, with respect, that's effective." Danny's smile was winter incarnate. "Our productivity rates are 40% higher than our competitors. Our employee turnover in key positions is virtually zero. Our profit margins speak for themselves. My rules work, Ms. Peterson, because I learned the hard way what happens when you let your guard down." The resignation letter crinkled as Danny picked it up, his eyes scanning the typed words with clinical detachment. "If you can't handle the requirements of your position, then perhaps it's time for you to seek employment elsewhere." "Danny." Sarah used his first name for the first and last time. "What happened to you?" For a heartbeat, something flickered behind his eyes, a shadow of pain so deep it seemed to reach into his soul. But then the mask slammed back into place, impenetrable as steel. "Nothing happened to me, Ms. Peterson. I simply learned to recognize patterns. And the pattern is clear: curvy women bring nothing but chaos." As if summoned by his words, the intercom buzzed. "Mr. Corleone." The security guard's voice crackled through the speaker. "Sorry to disturb you, sir, but we have a situation in the lobby. A woman insisting on interviewing for the senior financial analyst position. She doesn't have an appointment, and, well, she doesn't meet the company's aesthetic requirements." Danny's jaw tightened. "Have security escort her out." "Sir, I tried. She's persistent. And she's got credentials that are making the night manager nervous about just throwing her out. Says she's got references from Goldman Sachs and McKinsey." Sarah watched Danny's face, seeing the exact moment his curiosity warred with his principles. The curiosity won, but only barely. Fine. Send her up. 1 minute. Then security removes her permanently. As the intercom clicked off, Danny turned to Sarah with a look that could freeze hellfire. Consider this your final test, Ms. Peterson. Watch how quickly I dismantle whatever spell she thinks she can weave. And then maybe you'll understand why my rules aren't just preferences, they are survival. But as the elevator numbers climbed toward the 42nd floor, carrying a woman whose very existence would shatter everything Danny Corleone thought he knew about control, neither he nor Sarah could have imagined that in 60 seconds, the most powerful man in Manhattan was about to meet his match. The elevator dinged, soft as a death knell, and Danny Corleone's perfectly ordered world was about to come crashing down. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? Comment below with your predictions. I have a feeling you're not going to see this coming. The elevator doors slid open with a whisper, and Coco Lannister stepped into the sterile hallway like she owned it. She didn't just walk, she glided, her confidence preceding her like an aura of unshakable power. Her curves weren't hidden beneath loose clothing or apologetic posture. Instead, her tailored navy blazer hugged every magnificent inch of her hourglass figure, paired with a pencil skirt that celebrated rather than concealed her full hips and thick thighs. Her natural hair formed a crown of tight coils around her face, and her dark skin seemed to glow under the harsh fluorescent lights. But it was her eyes that announced her arrival, deep brown, intelligent, and absolutely fearless. Danny felt his breath catch in his throat, a sensation so foreign he nearly stumbled backward. For 15 years, no woman had managed to affect him physically. For 15 years, he'd trained his body to respond to nothing but profit margins and stock reports. Yet here stood this woman, and his pulse was hammering against his collar like a caged bird fighting for freedom. Mr. Corleone. Coco's voice carried the slight melody of the South, smooth as aged bourbon. She extended a perfectly manicured hand, her smile warm but professional. I'm Coco Lannister. Thank you for agreeing to see me. Danny stared at her outstretched hand as if it might bite him. This close, he could smell her perfume, something expensive and intoxicating that made his head spin. When he finally took her hand, the contact sent electricity shooting up his arm, and he jerked back as if burned. Ms. Lannister, he managed, his voice rougher than intended. You have 60 seconds. Coco's smile never wavered, but something sharp flickered in her eyes. She'd heard that tone before, from men who thought they could intimidate her into shrinking, into making herself smaller to fit their comfort zones. It never worked. Then I'll make them count. She opened her leather portfolio with practiced efficiency, never breaking eye contact. I have a PhD in financial engineering from Stanford, an MBA from Wharton, and 7 years of experience at Goldman Sachs where I increased client portfolios by an average of 37% annually. She placed a thick folder on his desk, her movements precise and confident. I've restructured failing companies, saved 3 major investment firms from bankruptcy, and my last project generated $200 million in profit over 18 months. Danny forced himself to look at the papers rather than at the way her blazer pulled slightly across her full breasts when she leaned forward. The credentials were impeccable, better than anything he'd seen in months. But impeccable credentials meant nothing if they came wrapped in temptation. Impressive, he said coldly, not looking up. But Corleone Industries has specific requirements for our work environment. Requirements that ensure maximum productivity and minimum disruption. Disruption. Coco repeated the word like she was tasting wine, rolling it around her tongue before swallowing. That's an interesting way to describe qualified women, Mr. Corleone. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sarah, forgotten in the corner, held her breath. I don't describe qualified women as anything, Danny snapped, finally meeting Coco's gaze. I describe distractions as distractions. And you, Ms. Lannister, are exactly the kind of distraction this company cannot afford. Because I'm curvy. Coco's voice remained level, but fire danced behind her eyes. Or because I'm black. I want to be clear about which of my natural characteristics you find so threatening. The accusation hit Danny like a physical blow. My hiring practices have nothing to do with race, but everything to do with body type. Coco interrupted smoothly. How progressive of you. Sarah watched the verbal sparring match with growing fascination. In 3 years, she'd never seen anyone challenge Danny Corleone directly. Most people cowered under his glacial stare, stammered through their presentations, and left with their tails between their legs. But Coco Lannister wasn't most people. Let me save us both some time, Coco continued, moving closer to Danny's desk. You've built this company by eliminating what you perceive as variables, specifically, women who don't fit your narrow definition of professional. You've convinced yourself this makes you a savvy businessman, when really, it makes you a coward. Danny's hands clenched into fists. Excuse me. A coward, Coco repeated, her southern accent becoming more pronounced as her temper rose. You're so terrified of losing control that you'd rather hire mediocre employees who make you feel safe than excellent employees who might challenge you. I am not afraid. Prove it. The challenge hung in the air between them like a gauntlet thrown down in a medieval court. Give me 1 week. Let me show you what I can do with the Henderson account, the one that's been bleeding money for 6 months. Danny felt his world tilting off its axis. The Henderson account was his biggest headache, a massive real estate portfolio that 3 of his best analysts had failed to turn around. That account is classified. Is worth $800 million, involves 17 commercial properties across 3 states, and is currently losing money because your analysts are approaching it like a traditional investment instead of a complex ecosystem. Coco smiled, sharp as a blade. I did my research, Mr. Corleone. The question is, are you brave enough to let me fix it? The silence stretched between them, heavy with challenge and possibility. Danny could feel sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. This woman was dangerous, not just because of her curves, not just because of the way she made his carefully controlled body betray him, but because she was brilliant. Brilliantly, terrifyingly brilliant. And brilliant women were the most dangerous of all. 1 week, he heard himself say, the words escaping before his conscious mind could stop them. But you'll work directly with me. No other employees. No disruptions. And if you fail? When I succeed, Coco corrected, extending her hand again. Do we have a deal? Danny stared at her hand, knowing that taking it would change everything. Behind him, Sarah held her breath. Around them, the city sparkled in the darkness, unaware that on the 42nd floor of the Corleone Industries building, a billionaire's armor was developing its first crack. He took her hand. The moment their skin touched, Danny knew he'd made a mistake that would either destroy him or save him. Coco's grip was firm, confident, and warm, and when she smiled, really smiled, not the professional mask she'd worn since walking in, it hit him like lightning. I'll see you Monday morning, Mr. Corleone. 8 sharp. As she gathered her portfolio and walked toward the elevator, Danny couldn't help but watch the confident sway of her hips, the proud set of her shoulders. When the elevator doors closed behind her, he realized he'd been holding his breath. Sir! Sarah's voice seemed to come from very far away. Danny turned to find his executive assistant staring at him with undisguised amazement. What? You just hired her. The weight of what he'd done crashed over him like a tsunami. For 15 years, he'd built his empire on one simple rule: no curvy women. No distractions. No variables he couldn't control. And in the span of 10 minutes, Coco Lannister had shattered that rule completely. Drop a comment and let me know, do you think Danny just made the biggest mistake of his life, or is love about to change everything? And don't forget to subscribe for more heart-stopping romance. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Danny stood at his office window at 7:30 a.m., watching the city wake up below. He'd barely slept over the weekend, his mind replaying every second of his encounter with Coco Lannister. 3 times he'd picked up his phone to call security and have her banned from the building. 3 times he'd set it down again, his finger hovering over her contact information like a man afraid of his own shadow. The problem wasn't just that she was beautiful, though God help him, she was the most stunning woman he'd ever seen. The problem was that she was right. The Henderson account was hemorrhaging money, and his best analysts were failing spectacularly. If she could actually turn it around. Mr. Corleone. Sarah's voice came through the intercom, tight with nervousness. Ms. Lannister is here. Danny's pulse spiked. Send her in. The door opened, and Coco entered like she was walking into her own office. Today she wore a deep emerald dress that hugged every curve while remaining completely professional. Her hair was pulled back into an elegant updo that showcased the graceful line of her neck, and she carried herself with the poise of a woman who knew exactly what she was worth. Good morning, she said, settling into the chair across from his desk without waiting to be invited. I hope you're ready to make some money. Danny forced himself to focus on her words rather than the way the morning light caught the golden undertones in her skin. The Henderson files are confidential. Were confidential. Coco opened her laptop with practiced efficiency. I spent the weekend getting up to speed. I have to say, Your analysts have been impressively wrong about almost everything. Excuse me. They are treating each property as an individual investment instead of recognizing the interconnected ecosystem. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, and suddenly his wall-mounted display screen came to life with a complex web of charts and projections. Look at this. Despite himself, Danny found himself leaning forward. The analysis was unlike anything he'd seen, not just numbers and projections, but a living, breathing map of relationships between properties, markets, and economic indicators. The Chicago properties aren't failing because of local market conditions, Coco continued, her voice gaining momentum as she hit her stride. They are failing because your team didn't account for the ripple effects of the Miami developments. When you boosted the luxury market in Miami, you inadvertently created a vacuum in the Chicago mid-range market. Danny's mind raced to keep up. That's not possible. The markets are completely independent. Are they? Coco's smile was sharp with intelligence. Your Chicago properties cater to corporate relocations, right? Mid-level executives moving for job opportunities. But when you made Miami more attractive for luxury corporate housing, you created a retention issue. Companies started keeping their top talent in Miami instead of rotating them through Chicago. The logic was brilliant, elegant, and completely invisible until she pointed it out. Danny felt a mixture of admiration and fury. Admiration for her insight, fury that his team had missed something so obvious. So what's your solution? He asked, trying to keep his voice level. Simple. Coco clicked to the next slide, and the screen filled with a restructuring plan so comprehensive it took Danny's breath away. We don't compete with Miami, we complement it. Turn the Chicago properties into a midterm housing solution for executives preparing for Miami relocations. 6 month to 2-year leases, fully furnished, with transition services included. That's... Danny paused, running the numbers in his head. That's actually brilliant. I know. There was no false modesty in her voice, just quiet confidence. The Miami properties become the destination. Chicago becomes the launching pad. Instead of 2 failing markets, you have 1 integrated system that serves the complete corporate relocation pipeline. Danny stared at the projections on the screen, his financial mind immediately grasping the implications. If her analysis was correct, and the math looked solid, they could potentially turn an $800 million loss into a $1 billion profit center within 18 months. The implementation would require significant restructuring, he said, more to himself than to her. New contracts, revised marketing, complete operational overhaul. Which I've already outlined. Coco clicked again, and a detailed timeline appeared. Phases 1 through 4, with key milestones and budget projections. We can have the first phase operational within 6 weeks. Danny looked up from the screen to find Coco watching him with those intelligent brown eyes, and suddenly the air in the room felt thick as honey. When she was talking about finance, explaining her brilliant analysis, she was captivating in a way that had nothing to do with her curves and everything to do with her mind. Which, he realized with growing alarm, was far more dangerous than mere physical attraction. This is good work, he admitted grudgingly. This is exceptional work, she corrected without missing a beat. The question is, are you prepared to implement it, or are you going to let your personal hang-ups cost your company $1 billion? The challenge hung between them like electricity before a storm. Danny stood slowly, moving to the window to put some distance between himself and the intoxicating woman who was systematically dismantling every defense he'd built. My personal hang-ups, he said carefully, have protected this company for 15 years. From what? The simple question hit him like a physical blow. From what? From chaos, he wanted to say. From distraction. From the kind of devastating betrayal that had once brought him to his knees. But looking at Coco's analysis, at the brilliant mind that had seen solutions where his best people had seen only problems, he couldn't voice any of those fears without sounding like exactly what she'd called him, a coward. I need time to review this, he said instead. You need to make a decision. Coco stood, smoothing her dress over her curves in a gesture that sent heat shooting through Danny's body. Because while you're reviewing, Henderson is hemorrhaging another $100,000 a day. She moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at him with an expression that was part challenge, part invitation. I'll be in conference room C, working on phase 2 implementation. When you're ready to stop being afraid of success, you know where to find me. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Danny alone with the scent of her perfume and the uncomfortable realization that everything he thought he knew about control was crumbling around him. On the wall screen, Coco's projections glowed like a roadmap to a future he'd never imagined possible. A future where his company could reach heights he'd only dreamed of. All he had to do was trust the one woman who terrified him most. What would you do? Trust your heart or stick to your rules? Let me know in the comments. And make sure you're subscribed because this story is about to get even more intense. For 3 days, Danny avoided conference room C like it contained a live grenade. He told himself he was being cautious, prudent, responsible. He had Sarah reschedule his meetings, took calls from his private office, and even ate lunch at his desk to avoid walking past the glass-walled room where Coco had set up her temporary command center. But late at night, when the building was empty except for security guards and cleaning crews, he found himself walking past that room. And every time, the lights were on. Every time, Coco was there, surrounded by laptops and financial reports, working with the kind of focused intensity that made something deep in his chest clench with unwilling admiration. On Wednesday evening, he couldn't help himself. He stopped outside the conference room and watched her through the glass wall. She'd kicked off her high heels and was pacing in stocking feet, talking animatedly into her Bluetooth headset while scribbling notes on a whiteboard covered in complex equations. Her hair had escaped from its professional updo, curling around her face in soft tendrils, and there was a coffee stain on her silk blouse that somehow made her look more human, more real, more beautiful. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just her curves that attracted him, though God knew, watching her move was like witnessing poetry in motion. It was her passion, her intelligence, the way she threw herself completely into her work with no thought for anything but excellence. She reminded him of himself at 25, hungry and determined and absolutely fearless. The woman who'd destroyed him had been beautiful, but she'd never been passionate about anything except what his success could buy her. Coco was different. Coco was dangerous. The thought sent him fleeing back to his office, but it was too late. The image of her stockinged feet, her tousled hair, her complete absorption in her work, was burned into his memory. Thursday morning brought a phone call that changed everything. Danny. The voice on the other end belonged to Richard Hamilton, CEO of Hamilton Enterprises and one of Danny's biggest clients. I need to see you. Today. Danny's blood chilled. Hamilton's investment portfolio was worth over $2 billion, and if he was calling for an emergency meeting, it meant trouble on a scale that could devastate Corleone Industries. An hour later, Hamilton sat across from Danny's desk, his face grim with bad news. I'm pulling my investments, Danny. All of them. The words hit Danny like a physical blow. Richard, if this is about returns, we can discuss. It's not about returns. Hamilton's voice was heavy with regret. It's about Henderson. Danny's heart stopped. Henderson. Word is getting out that the account is failing. My board is nervous about having our money managed by a firm that can't handle its own flagship properties. Hamilton spread his hands apologetically. I'm sorry, Danny. I really am. But I can't afford to be associated with a sinking ship. After Hamilton left, Danny sat in his office staring at the wall, calculating the disaster. If Hamilton pulled out, others would follow. The domino effect could destroy everything he'd built in a matter of weeks. Unless, he found himself walking toward conference room C before he consciously decided to move. Coco looked up when he entered, her eyes immediately reading the tension in his face. What's wrong? Hamilton's pulling out. $2 billion in investments. The words tasted like ashes in his mouth. Because of Henderson. Coco's expression shifted from concern to fierce determination. Then we implement the plan. Now. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. She stood, moving to the whiteboard covered with her projections. Look at these numbers, Danny. Really look at them. Hearing his first name from her lips sent an unexpected shiver down his spine, but he forced himself to focus on the charts. Even if your analysis is correct, implementation will take months. Implementation of the full plan, yes. But we can show immediate improvement in 30 days if we act now. Her eyes blazed with conviction. I've been running scenarios all week. If we announce the restructuring publicly, if we show the market that Henderson is part of a larger strategic vision instead of a failing investment, we can stabilize the situation before the panic spreads. Danny stared at the numbers, his mind racing. She was right, again. A bold public announcement, backed by solid financials and a clear timeline, could actually turn the crisis into a marketing opportunity. The risk is nothing compared to the risk of doing nothing. Coco moved closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume again, see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. You hired me to save Henderson, Danny. Let me save it. The use of his name again, the way she said it with such confidence and intimacy, made his resolve crumble. If this fails, it won't. She reached out and touched his arm, the contact sending electricity through his entire nervous system. Trust me. Trust. The word he'd sworn never to associate with any woman again. But looking into Coco's eyes, seeing the absolute certainty there, he found himself nodding. What do you need? Full authority over the Henderson account and a press conference tomorrow afternoon. Her smile was brilliant, transformative. And Danny, stop avoiding me. We're going to be working very closely together. The promise in her voice made his pulse race and his carefully constructed walls tremble. As she began outlining her strategy, Danny realized he wasn't just risking his company on her brilliance. He was risking his heart. And for the first time in 15 years, that terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. That evening, they worked side by side until nearly midnight, preparing for the press conference that would either save Corleone Industries or destroy it completely. Every time their hands brushed reaching for the same document, every time she leaned close to point out something on his laptop screen, Danny felt his control slipping a little further. When she finally gathered her things to leave, she paused at the door. Danny! Her voice was softer now, almost vulnerable. Why haven't you asked me about my background? Most men like you would want to know how I learned to see patterns others miss. He looked up from the press release they'd been crafting. Does it matter? It might. She hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. I grew up poor. Really poor. The kind of poor where you learn to see everything, every opportunity, every threat, every angle, because missing something means not eating that night. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Danny felt something shift in his chest, a recognition that went deeper than professional respect. That's how you see the connections, he said quietly. The patterns my analysts missed. Survival teaches you to see the whole system, not just the individual parts. Her smile was sad and knowing. Your analysts see numbers on spreadsheets. I see people's lives, market forces, the 1,000 invisible threads that connect everything to everything else. She left him alone with that revelation, and Danny sat in his empty office understanding that he'd been wrong about everything. Coco Lannister wasn't just brilliant. She was brilliant in a way that complemented his own vision perfectly. She was exactly what his company needed. She was exactly what he needed. And that realization scared him more than any financial crisis ever could. The tension is building, and I can feel your hearts racing. What do you think? Is Danny finally ready to let love into his life? Comment below with your thoughts, and hit that subscribe button because tomorrow changes everything. The press conference was a masterpiece. Coco stood beside Danny at the podium, her presence commanding and confident as she outlined the Henderson restructuring plan to a room full of skeptical financial journalists. Her deep emerald suit was perfectly tailored, her hair swept into an elegant chignon, and when she spoke about market dynamics and profit projections, her southern accent gave the dry financial data a warmth that made it accessible, compelling, almost seductive. Danny watched the reporters' faces change as she spoke, skepticism melting into interest, then into excitement. She wasn't just presenting numbers, she was telling a story about vision, about seeing opportunities where others saw obstacles. The traditional approach to real estate investment treats each property as an isolated asset, Coco explained, clicking to a slide that showed the interconnected web of relationships she'd identified. But markets don't exist in isolation. They are living ecosystems, and the most profitable approach is to understand and leverage those connections. A reporter from the Wall Street Journal raised his hand. Ms. Lannister, this analysis suggests that Corleone Industries has been approaching the Henderson account incorrectly for months. Are you saying the firm's previous strategies were flawed? Danny tensed, waiting for Coco to throw him under the bus, to position herself as the savior cleaning up his mistakes. It's what Victoria would have done. Victoria, the woman whose betrayal had taught him never to trust beautiful women with his vulnerabilities. Instead, Coco's response surprised him completely. I'm saying that markets evolve, and the most successful firms are those that evolve with them, she said smoothly. Mr. Corleone built Corleone Industries by being ahead of the curve, and this restructuring is another example of his commitment to innovation and excellence. Sometimes the best strategy requires stepping back to see the bigger picture, and that's exactly what we've done here. She'd protected him. Without hesitation, without angle playing, she'd positioned the restructuring as his vision, his success. The realization hit Danny like lightning, and he felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been frozen solid for 15 years. After the press conference, as reporters clustered around them with follow-up questions, Danny found himself watching Coco with new eyes. She fielded every question with grace and intelligence, but always deferred credit back to him, to the company, to their partnership. Partnership. When had he started thinking of it that way? Mr. Corleone. A reporter from Bloomberg was addressing him directly. The projections Ms. Lannister presented suggest that Corleone Industries could see unprecedented growth over the next 2 years. Are you planning to expand your team to handle that kind of volume? Danny looked at Coco, who gave him an encouraging nod. We're always looking for exceptional talent, he said carefully. And Ms. Lannister has certainly proven herself to be exactly that. The words felt strange in his mouth, praise for a curvy woman, spoken publicly, recorded and broadcast. Everything he'd spent 15 years avoiding, he was now embracing in front of the entire financial media. Later that evening, they returned to the office to monitor the market response. The reaction was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. Henderson stock prices stabilized within hours, and by closing bell, Corleone Industries had gained back everything it had lost over the previous month. We did it, Coco said, staring at the numbers on Danny's wall display with something like awe in her voice. We actually did it. You did it, Danny corrected, loosening his tie as the adrenaline of the day began to wear off. This was your plan, your vision. Our vision, she insisted, turning to face him. I couldn't have implemented any of this without your authority, your platform, your willingness to take the risk. They were standing closer than necessary in the intimate lighting of his office, the city sparkling below them through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Coco had kicked off her heels again, bringing her height down so that she had to tilt her head back slightly to meet his eyes, and the gesture made something primitive and protective surge through Danny's chest. Why did you protect me today? The question escaped before he could stop it. During the press conference, you could have taken all the credit. Coco's expression grew thoughtful. Because that's not who I am. But it would have been smart politically. Position yourself as the genius who saved the account. Danny. There was that name again, spoken with such gentle firmness that it made his heart skip. Do you really think I'm that calculating? He wanted to say yes. He needed to say yes, because believing that all beautiful women were calculating, manipulative, selfish was the foundation his entire worldview was built on. But looking into Coco's eyes, remembering the way she'd worked tirelessly for days without seeking credit or recognition, he found that he couldn't lie. No, he said quietly. I don't. Something shifted in the air between them, a current of electricity that had nothing to do with professional admiration and everything to do with the way the lamplight caught the golden undertones in her skin, the way her lips parted slightly when she looked at him. Can I ask you something? Coco's voice was softer now, more intimate. What happened to you? What made you so afraid of women like me? Danny felt his walls slamming back into place, but before he could deflect or change the subject, Coco continued. Because you weren't always like this. I've done research on you, Danny. Early interviews, business profiles from when you were building this company. You used to smile more. You used to talk about balance, about building something meaningful, not just profitable. The observation cut deeper than any accusation could have. People change. People get hurt, she corrected gently. And then they build walls to keep from getting hurt again. I understand that. I've done it myself. The admission surprised him. You. My ex-fiancé. Coco's smile was rueful and sad. 3 years ago, I thought he loved me for my mind, my ambition, my dreams. Turns out he loved me for how good I looked on his arm and how much my connections could advance his career. When I wouldn't use my Goldman Sachs contacts to get him a job he wasn't qualified for, he decided I was too independent for his taste. Danny felt anger surge through him. Sharp, protective, completely irrational anger on behalf of a woman he barely knew but was beginning to understand in ways that terrified him. He was an idiot, Danny said, the words coming out rougher than he intended. Yes, he was. But he taught me something important about trust. Coco moved closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, feel the warmth radiating from her skin. He taught me that real trust isn't about finding someone who will never hurt you. It's about finding someone worth the risk of being hurt. The words hung between them like a confession, and Danny felt his carefully constructed world tilting on its axis. Coco. I know you're scared, she whispered, reaching up to touch his face with fingertips soft as silk. I know someone hurt you badly, broke something inside you that you're not sure can be fixed. But Danny, you can't live your whole life in a cage, no matter how safe it feels. Her touch was electric, sending shockwaves through his nervous system. For 15 years, he'd avoided this kind of intimacy, this vulnerability, this terrifying sensation of free falling without a net. But Coco's eyes held no calculation, no hidden agenda, only a warmth and understanding that made his defenses crumble like paper in rain. Victoria, he heard himself say, the name escaping like a confession. Her name was Victoria, my business partner, my fiancée, the woman I thought I'd spend my life with. Coco's hand stilled against his cheek, but she didn't pull away. What happened? She emptied our accounts, sold our assets, destroyed our client relationships, and disappeared with everything we'd built together. The words tasted like poison, but somehow saying them to Coco made them hurt less. I lost everything. My company, my savings, my reputation. I had to start over from nothing. And she was curvy, Coco said quietly, understanding dawning in her eyes. She was curvy, and beautiful, and brilliant, and she used all of it to destroy me. Danny's voice cracked on the last word. So I made rules. No curvy women. No beautiful women in positions of power. No one who could get close enough to hurt me again. Oh, Danny. Coco's other hand came up to frame his face, and the gentleness in her touch nearly undid him. I'm so sorry she did that to you. But sweetheart, you can't punish every woman for one woman's sins. The endearment hit him like lightning. When was the last time someone had called him sweetheart? When was the last time anyone had touched him with such tenderness? I built an empire on those rules, he whispered. You built a prison, Coco corrected softly. A very successful, very profitable prison. But Danny, what's the point of having everything if you can't share it with anyone? What's the point of being untouchable if it means you're untouchable? Her logic was flawless, her words cutting through 15 years of carefully constructed defenses with surgical precision. But more than her logic, it was the way she looked at him, like he was worth the risk, like he was worth fighting for, like he was worth loving. The thought terrified him. I don't know how to trust anymore, he admitted, the confession torn from somewhere deep in his soul. Then let me show you. Coco's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a promise. Let me prove that not all curvy women are Victoria. Let me prove that some of us are worth the risk. She rose on her tiptoes, bringing her lips closer to his, and Danny felt his world narrow to this moment, this woman, this choice between the safety of his walls and the terrifying possibility of something real. Coco, he breathed, her name a prayer and a plea. Trust me, she whispered against his lips. Just this once. Trust me. And then she was kissing him, soft and sweet and patient, and Danny felt 15 years of ice melting in the space of a heartbeat. Her lips were warm and willing, her body soft and curved and perfect against his, and when his arms came up to wrap around her waist, pulling her closer, she melted into him like she'd been made to fit there. The kiss deepened, became something hungry and desperate and healing all at once. Danny poured 15 years of loneliness into it, 15 years of wanting and denying and protecting himself from exactly this kind of beautiful destruction. But this wasn't destruction. This was creation. The building of something new from the ashes of something broken. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Coco rested her forehead against his. See, she whispered, her smile brilliant and breathtaking. The world didn't end. Danny laughed, the sound rusty with disuse but genuine. Give it time. But even as he said the words, he knew they weren't true. The world hadn't ended. If anything, it felt like it was just beginning. 3 weeks later, Danny's world came crashing down, again. He arrived at his office Monday morning to find a federal investigator waiting in his lobby, flanked by 2 FBI agents and holding a warrant that made his blood turn to ice. Daniel Corleone. The lead investigator was a sharp-faced woman in her 50s, her eyes cold as winter. Agent Sarah Mitchell, Financial Crimes Division. We need to speak with you about the Henderson account restructuring. Danny's mind raced as he led them to his office, trying to process what was happening. The Henderson restructuring had been flawless, completely legal, brilliantly executed, profitable beyond their wildest projections. What could the FBI possibly want? Mr. Corleone. Agent Mitchell settled into the chair across from his desk, her expression grim. We have reason to believe that the Henderson account was used to facilitate money laundering for several offshore criminal organizations. The words hit Danny like a physical blow. That's impossible. Every transaction was scrutinized, every investment vetted. By Ms. Coco Lannister, according to our records. Agent Mitchell opened a thick file folder, and Danny's heart stopped as he saw surveillance photos of Coco entering and leaving various buildings over the past month. What exactly do you know about Ms. Lannister's background, Mr. Corleone? I know she's brilliant, qualified, and has an impeccable record at Goldman Sachs. Ms. Lannister was terminated from Goldman Sachs 18 months ago for suspicious trading activities. Agent Mitchell's voice was matter-of-fact, devastating. She's currently under investigation by the SEC for her role in several questionable offshore investments. Danny felt the room spinning around him. You're lying. I wish I was. Agent Mitchell slid a document across his desk. This is Ms. Lannister's real employment record. The references she provided, the credentials she claimed, 90% of it was fabricated. Danny stared at the document, seeing Coco's photo paperclipped to a record that told a completely different story. Termination for cause. SEC investigation pending. Multiple red flags that should have been caught by any competent background check. Red flags he'd never bothered to verify because he'd been too distracted by her curves, her confidence, her brilliant mind to do basic due diligence. The Henderson restructuring, Agent Mitchell continued, involved moving over $800 million through a complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts. Money that, we have reason to believe, originated from several criminal enterprises. The restructuring was legitimate. The restructuring was a sophisticated money laundering operation disguised as legitimate investment strategy. Agent Mitchell's tone was final, condemning. And you, Mr. Corleone, were either complicit or incredibly naive. Danny's hands trembled as the full scope of his stupidity crashed over him. He'd given Coco complete authority over the Henderson account. He'd signed off on every transfer, every restructuring move, every brilliant strategy that had seemed too good to be true. Because it was too good to be true. Where is Ms. Lannister now? Agent Mitchell asked. I don't know. She was supposed to be in meetings all day. Danny reached for his phone to call Coco, but Agent Mitchell's hand stopped him. Mr. Corleone, Coco Lannister disappeared 3 days ago, along with approximately $50 million in liquid assets from the Henderson restructuring. The phone slipped from Danny's nerveless fingers. $50 million. Gone. Along with the woman he'd fallen in love with. The woman who'd played him perfectly, just like Victoria had 15 years ago. We're going to need you to come with us for questioning, Agent Mitchell said, standing. And Mr. Corleone, you might want to call your lawyer. The next 6 hours were a nightmare of fluorescent lights, stale coffee, and questions that painted him as either a criminal mastermind or the most gullible man in Manhattan. Danny answered every question truthfully, provided every document they requested, and slowly watched his life's work crumble around him for the second time. By the time his lawyer secured his release, the story had broken. Financial news channels were running round-the-clock coverage of the Corleone Industries money laundering scandal. His clients were fleeing en masse. The SEC had frozen his assets pending investigation. And somewhere out there, Coco Lannister was probably laughing at how easily she'd destroyed him. Again, Danny returned to his empty office building at midnight, using his keycard one last time before security would be changed. The 42nd floor felt like a tomb, echoing with ghosts of conversations and kisses that had apparently meant nothing. He sat in his chair and stared at the wall where Coco's brilliant analysis had once glowed, seeing it now for what it truly was, an elaborate con, perfectly executed by someone who understood exactly how to manipulate his weaknesses. She'd studied him, learned about Victoria, crafted her entire approach to hit every note that would make him vulnerable. The shared stories about betrayal, the way she'd protected his reputation during the press conference, even that kiss, all of it calculated, planned, designed to make him trust her completely. And it had worked. God help him, it had worked perfectly. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I'm sorry, Danny. You weren't supposed to get hurt. The money will be returned within 48 hours. I never meant for it to go this far. See. Danny stared at the message, feeling something die inside his chest. Even now, even after everything, she was still playing the game. The apologetic tone, the promise to return the money, the suggestion that she cared about him, it was all part of the performance. He deleted the message without responding. Outside his window, Manhattan glittered in the darkness, indifferent to his destruction. 15 years ago, he'd rebuilt from nothing after Victoria's betrayal. Now, at 45, broke and humiliated and facing potential criminal charges, he wasn't sure he had the strength to do it again. Not when the woman who'd destroyed him had also made him feel, for just a few weeks, like he might be worth loving. Sarah Peterson found him there the next morning, slumped in his chair, staring at nothing. "Danny." Her voice was gentle, concerned. "The FBI released a statement. They caught her." Danny looked up, feeling nothing. "Way. Lex." Trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. Sarah sat down across from him, her expression sad but not surprised. "They recovered most of the money." "Danny. I'm so sorry." "Don't." Danny's voice was raw, broken. "Don't apologize for my stupidity." "It wasn't stupidity. It was hope." Sarah's words were soft but firm. "For the first time in years, you let yourself hope that someone might actually care about you for who you are, not what you have. That's not stupidity, Danny. That's courage." "It's the same thing," Danny said bitterly. "Hope is just stupidity with better marketing." But even as he said the words, he could still taste Coco's kiss on his lips, still remember the way she'd touched his face with such tenderness. And somewhere deep in his chest, beneath the pain and humiliation and rage, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, not all of it had been an act. Maybe some of it had been real. And that possibility was the most terrifying thought of all. 2 days later, Danny received a phone call that changed everything he thought he knew about Coco Lannister. "Mr. Corleone." The voice was unfamiliar, professional, carrying a slight accent he couldn't place. "My name is Detective Maria Santos with the Lapped Financial Crimes Unit. I need to speak with you about Coco Lannister." Danny's jaw tightened. "I've told the FBI everything I know." "Sir, I think there are things about Ms. Lannister that you don't know. Things that might change your perspective on what happened." Against his better judgment, Danny found himself agreeing to meet Detective Santos at a coffee shop in Midtown. She was a small, intense woman with prematurely gray hair and eyes that had seen too much, but when she spoke about Coco, there was something almost protective in her tone. "Mr. Corleone, what do you know about Coco Lannister's family?" "Nothing," Danny said curtly. "Apparently, I don't know anything real about her at all." Detective Santos slid a photograph across the table. It showed a younger Coco, maybe 16, standing beside a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a warm smile. "That's Coco with her father, Marcus Lannister. He was a financial investigator for the Lapped, specialized in complex money laundering cases." Danny stared at the photo, seeing something in teenage Coco's face that reminded him of the woman who'd kissed him in his office, not the calculated seductress he now believed her to be, but someone genuine, vulnerable, real. "Was," he repeated. "Marcus was killed 3 years ago while investigating a money laundering operation connected to several offshore criminal organizations." Detective Santos's voice was heavy with old grief. He was getting close to exposing the whole network when his car was run off the road. The case went cold, but Coco never stopped believing it was murder. Danny felt something shift in his chest, a crack in the wall of anger and betrayal he'd built around his heart. "What does this have to do with?" "The Henderson account, Mr. Corleone, was being used to launder money for the same criminal organization that killed her father." Detective Santos leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Coco didn't seduce you to steal your money. She seduced you to get close enough to the Henderson account to gather evidence against her father's killers." The words hit Danny like a physical blow. "That's impossible. She took $50 million. She moved $50 million to a secured FBI account, then staged her own disappearance to make the criminals think she'd stolen it." Detective Santos pulled out another document. The whole operation was coordinated with federal investigators. Coco has been working undercover for 2 years, trying to infiltrate the money laundering network. Danny's mind reeled, trying to process this information. "But the FBI agent who questioned me said, Agent Mitchell is part of the task force. Her job was to make the interrogation look real, to sell the idea that you and Coco were both under investigation." Detective Santos's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Corleone, did it never occur to you to wonder why such a brilliant, qualified woman would want to work for a firm that had an explicit policy against hiring women like her?" It hadn't. Danny realized with growing horror that he'd been so caught up in his own fears and desires that he'd never questioned Coco's motivations, never wondered why someone with her credentials would fight so hard for a job at a company that seemed designed to reject her. "She targeted you specifically," Detective Santos continued, "because the Henderson account was the key to everything." "But Mr. Corleone." She paused, studying his face. "I've read the surveillance reports. I've watched the recordings from your office. Whatever started as an undercover operation became something real for her. Something that scared the hell out of her handlers. Danny's heart hammered against his ribs. What do you mean? I mean Coco Lannister fell in love with you, Danny Corleone. And it nearly destroyed the entire operation. The coffee shop seemed to fade around them as Detective Santos continued. 3 weeks ago, she tried to quit. Told her FBI handler that she couldn't go through with the final phase because she couldn't bear to hurt you. They had to threaten to shut down the investigation entirely to get her back on mission. Danny remembered that last night in his office, the way Coco had kissed him with such desperate intensity, the way she'd whispered "trust me" like a prayer. Had she been saying goodbye? The text message she sent you, Detective Santos said softly, that wasn't part of the operation. That was a woman trying to find a way to tell the man she loves that everything between them wasn't a lie. Danny's hands shook as he set down his coffee cup. Where is she now? Safe house in federal protection. The evidence she gathered is going to bring down a criminal network that's been operating for over a decade. She's a hero, Mr. Corleone. But she thinks you'll never forgive her for the deception. She's right, Danny said automatically, but the words felt hollow, wrong. Because if what Detective Santos was saying was true, then Coco hadn't betrayed him. She'd sacrificed her own happiness, her own chance at love, to get justice for her murdered father. She'd been protecting him, just like she'd protected him during the press conference. Mr. Corleone, Detective Santos said gently, I've seen a lot of undercover operations go wrong because agents get emotionally involved. But I've never seen anyone fight as hard as Coco did to find a way to complete her mission without destroying the person she cared about. She spent weeks trying to figure out how to take down the criminals without implicating you or your company. But she couldn't, Danny realized. No. The only way to get the evidence was to make it look like she'd stolen from you, to make the criminals trust her enough to reveal their operations. Detective Santos stood, leaving her business card on the table. The case will be resolved within the week. After that, she'll be free to contact you if she chooses. But Danny, she doesn't think you'll want to hear from her. After Detective Santos left, Danny sat alone in the coffee shop, staring at her business card and trying to reconcile everything he thought he knew with this new reality. Coco hadn't been another Victoria. She'd been exactly what she'd appeared to be, brilliant, passionate, genuine, and brave enough to risk everything for justice. The only deception had been her reason for being there, and even that deception had been motivated by love for her father and, eventually, love for Danny himself. She'd fallen in love with him despite her mission, not because of it. And he'd responded to her love by immediately assuming the worst, by letting 15-year-old wounds dictate his reaction instead of trusting what his heart had been trying to tell him. Danny pulled out his phone and scrolled to Coco's deleted text message, wishing he could undelete it, wishing he could read between the lines of her apology and see what Detective Santos had shown him. A woman caught between duty and love, trying desperately to find a way to honor both. For the first time in days, Danny felt something other than anger and betrayal. He felt hope. And this time, he wasn't going to let fear destroy it. 1 week later, Danny stood outside a nondescript federal building in Queens, holding a visitor's pass and trying to calm his racing heart. Detective Santos had called that morning with news that the case was closed. The criminal network had been dismantled, dozens of arrests had been made, and Coco was finally free from federal protection. She was staying in a small apartment in Queens, trying to figure out what to do with her life now that her 2-year mission was over. She doesn't know I'm giving you this address, Detective Santos had warned. And she might not want to see you. She's been through a lot, Danny. Don't break her heart any more than it's already been broken. Now, standing outside Coco's building, Danny wondered if he was making a massive mistake. What if she really didn't want to see him? What if the feelings Detective Santos had described were just wishful thinking? What if Coco had already decided to start fresh somewhere far away from the wreckage of their relationship? But then he remembered the way she'd kissed him in his office, the way she'd touched his face with such tenderness, the way she'd whispered "trust me" like she was begging for something she wasn't sure she deserved. He climbed the 3 flights of stairs to apartment 3B and knocked before he could lose his nerve. The door opened, and Danny's breath caught in his throat. Coco looked exhausted, fragile in a way he'd never seen before. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, she wore no makeup, and her clothes were casual jeans and a Columbia University sweatshirt that had seen better days. But her eyes, those beautiful brown eyes that had captivated him from the first moment, widened in shock when she saw him. "Danny!" Her voice was barely a whisper. What are you doing here? Detective Santos told me everything, he said, his own voice rough with emotion. About your father. About the investigation. About why you really came to my company. Coco's face crumpled, and she stepped back from the door as if he'd struck her. Danny, I'm so sorry. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I never wanted to hurt you. I know. He stepped into the apartment, closing the door behind him. I know you didn't want to hurt me, Coco. I know that what happened between us was real. Tears spilled down her cheeks. It was real for me. But I understand if you can't forgive me for lying to you, for using you. You didn't use me. Danny moved closer, and when she didn't pull away, he reached out to cup her face in his hands the way she'd done to him that night in his office. You fell in love with me, and it complicated everything. Just like I fell in love with you and it scared me so badly I was ready to run rather than admit it. You, what? Coco's eyes searched his face, looking for the truth behind his words. I love you, Coco Lannister, Danny said, his voice steady and sure. I love your brilliant mind and your brave heart and the way you fought for justice even when it cost you everything you wanted. I love that you protected me even when you were undercover, that you tried to quit your mission rather than hurt me, that you've been carrying the weight of your father's death and your own broken heart and you're still the strongest person I've ever met. Danny, her voice broke on his name. I love you, he continued, his thumbs brushing away her tears. And I'm sorry it took me so long to realize that love isn't about avoiding risk. It's about finding someone worth the risk. Coco stared at him for a long moment, her breathing shallow and quick. You don't understand. I lied to you about everything. My background, my credentials, my reasons for being there. You lied about the facts, Danny said gently. But you didn't lie about who you are. The woman who saw patterns my analysts missed. That was real. The woman who worked 18-hour days to save the Henderson account? That was real. The woman who kissed me like I was worth saving? That was real too. But I deceived you. To get justice for your murdered father and to take down criminals who were using my company to launder money. Danny's voice grew stronger, more certain. Coco, you could have destroyed me completely if you'd wanted to. You could have implicated me in the money laundering, could have let me take the fall for everything. Instead, you found a way to complete your mission while protecting me and my company, even when it meant sacrificing your own happiness. Coco's tears were flowing freely now. I thought you'd never forgive me. I thought you'd see this as just another betrayal, another Victoria. You're nothing like Victoria, Danny said firmly. Victoria was selfish, greedy, cruel. You're brave and loyal and willing to sacrifice everything for the people you love. You're exactly the kind of woman I was too scared to believe existed. He pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers the way she'd done to him after their first kiss. I love you, Coco. I love all of you, the real you. And if you'll have me, if you can forgive me for not trusting you when it mattered most, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that you were worth every risk. Danny, she whispered, her hands coming up to frame his face. I love you too. I've loved you since that first night when you let me stay and prove myself. I've loved you through every moment of this nightmare, and I'll love you for the rest of my life if you'll let me. He kissed her then, pouring everything he couldn't say into the contact between their lips. It was desperate and tender and healing all at once, a promise that they could build something real from the ashes of deception and betrayal. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Coco smiled through her tears, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her since this whole nightmare began. So what happens now? She asked softly. Now, Danny said, his own smile matching hers, we rebuild. Together. The FBI cleared both me and the company of any wrongdoing, and with the Henderson restructuring, your brilliant, legitimate Henderson restructuring, Corleone Industries is more profitable than ever. And you want me to come back. I want you to come back as my partner, Danny said. In business and in everything else. If you're interested. Coco's smile grew radiant, transformative. Are you asking me to marry you, Danny Corleone? I'm asking you to marry me, love me, fight with me, build an empire with me, and spend the rest of your life driving me crazy with your brilliant mind and your beautiful heart. His voice grew husky with emotion. I'm asking you to trust me with forever, Coco Lannister. What do you say? I say yes, she whispered, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him again. Yes to all of it. Yes to forever. As they held each other in that small apartment, surrounded by the debris of their separate heartbreaks and the promise of their shared future, Danny realized that sometimes the greatest victories came not from avoiding risk, but from finding someone worth risking everything for. And Coco Lannister was worth everything and more. Oh, my goodness. I am literally crying happy tears right now. The way they found their way back to each other. I can't even. Are you feeling all the emotions? Let me know in the comments how this made you feel. And please hit that subscribe button because stories like this are why we're all here for love. 6 months later, the engagement party was held on the rooftop of the Corleone Industries building, the same building where their love story had begun with suspicion and ended with trust. Manhattan sparkled around them like a galaxy of stars, and the warm June evening carried the promise of new beginnings. Danny stood at the edge of the rooftop, watching Coco work the crowd with the same confidence and grace that had first captivated him. She wore a flowing emerald dress that hugged her curves perfectly, her hair styled in soft waves that caught the light from the string of fairy lights overhead, and when she laughed at something Sarah Peterson was saying, the sound made Danny's heart skip the way it had from the very first day. You know, Detective Santos appeared beside him, holding a glass of champagne. I've seen a lot of undercover operations in my career, but I've never seen one that ended with the target and the agent getting married. Danny smiled, not taking his eyes off his fiancée. Technically, I think I was the one who got caught. By the right woman, finally. Detective Santos raised her glass in a toast. To justice served and love found. They drank, and Danny felt a profound sense of completion settle over him. The criminal network that had killed Coco's father was dismantled, their key players serving long prison sentences. Corleone Industries had not only survived the scandal but had thrived, with Coco's restructuring strategies becoming the model for investment firms across the country. And most importantly, he'd learned the difference between protection and imprisonment, between caution and cowardice. Danny. Coco appeared at his side, slipping her arm through his with the natural intimacy of a woman who knew she belonged there. Marcus is asking about the wedding venue. I told him we were still deciding between the plaza and that little vineyard upstate. Marcus, Detective Santos, grinned. I vote for the vineyard. Your father would have loved seeing you married somewhere beautiful and peaceful. Coco's smile grew soft and sad and grateful all at once. He would have loved Danny too. Dad always said the best men were the ones who weren't afraid to grow, to change, to admit when they were wrong. Speaking of growing and changing, Danny said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket, I have something for you. Coco opened the envelope with curiosity, then gasped when she saw what was inside. Danny, this is the deed to a new office building, he finished. Specifically, the headquarters for Lannister Corleone Financial Consulting. That is, if you're interested in being my full partner in every sense of the word. Tears sparkled in Coco's eyes as she stared at the document. Lannister Corleone. Equal partners, Danny confirmed. Equal say in every decision, equal profit sharing, equal everything. No more rules about who can or can't work there based on their appearance. Just brilliant people doing brilliant work. Oh, Danny. Coco threw her arms around his neck, kissing him soundly while their guests applauded and cheered around them. I love you so much. I love you too, future Mrs. Corleone, he murmured against her lips. Even if you do drive me crazy on a daily basis. Especially because I drive you crazy, she corrected with a grin. Life would be boring if you always knew what to expect. As the party continued around them, Danny found himself thinking about the man he'd been just 6 months ago, bitter, lonely, so afraid of being hurt again that he'd built walls around his heart tall enough to block out the sun. That man could never have imagined standing here now, surrounded by friends and colleagues who were celebrating not just his engagement, but his transformation from a man ruled by fear into one guided by love. Penny, for your thoughts? Coco asked, noticing his contemplative mood. Just thinking about how wrong I was, Danny said, pulling her closer. About everything. About thinking I could control love, that I could protect myself from pain by avoiding risk. About believing that all curvy, beautiful, brilliant women were the same. Well, Coco said with a mischievous smile, you were right about one thing. Curvy women are dangerous. Oh, really? Absolutely. We have the power to make stubborn billionaires fall completely, helplessly, irrevocably in love. She traced patterns on his chest with her finger, sending familiar electricity through his nervous system. Very dangerous indeed. Danny laughed, the sound rich and genuine and full of joy. Then I guess I'm in serious trouble. The best kind of trouble, Coco agreed, rising on her tiptoes to whisper in his ear. The kind that changes your whole life for the better. Later that evening, After the last guest had left and they were alone on the rooftop under the stars, Danny and Coco slow danced to music only they could hear. The city spread out below them like a promise of infinite possibilities, and Danny felt a peace he'd never known before. The peace that came from finding your other half, your perfect match, your partner in every sense of the word. Danny. Coco's voice was soft, dreamy. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd never changed your hiring policy? If you'd stuck to your rules and never let me up to your office that night? Danny considered the question seriously. I think, he said finally, that you would have found another way. You're too determined, too brilliant, too passionate to let a few obstacles stop you from getting what you needed. You would have found a way to get justice for your father, with or without my help. But would we have found each other? Yes, Danny said with absolute certainty. Maybe not that night, maybe not that way, but yes. I believe some people are meant to find each other, Coco. And you and I, we were always meant to be. Even if I am exactly the kind of woman you spent 15 years avoiding. Especially because you're exactly the kind of woman I spent 15 years avoiding, Danny corrected. You're everything I was afraid to want and everything I didn't know I needed. You're my perfect complement, my other half, my salvation from a life lived in the shadows of fear. Coco's eyes sparkled with tears of joy. And you're mine. My stubborn, brilliant, protective, wonderful man who learned that love isn't about staying safe. It's about finding someone worth being brave for. As they kissed under the Manhattan sky, surrounded by the lights of a city that had witnessed their love story from beginning to this beautiful new beginning, Danny knew that his rules had been wrong about everything except one thing. Curvy women were dangerous. They were dangerous because they could make a man want to be better than he thought possible. They were dangerous because they could break down walls built over decades with nothing but love and patience and unwavering faith. They were dangerous because they could take a broken, bitter man and teach him that the greatest risk was not in loving, but in refusing to love. And Danny Corleone was grateful every day for the dangerous, beautiful, brilliant woman who had walked into his office and destroyed his carefully controlled world, only to help him build something infinitely better in its place. A world built on love instead of fear. A world where curvy women weren't banned, they were treasured. A world where the billionaire's rules had been rewritten by the only woman brave enough to break them. As the clock struck midnight, marking the official start of what would be the first day of the rest of their lives together, Danny whispered against Coco's lips, I love you, future Mrs. Corleone. I love you too, Mr. Corleone, she whispered back. Rules and all. Especially the new rules. What new rules? Danny smiled, his eyes twinkling with mischief and love. Rule number 1, always trust your heart, even when it scares you. Rule number 2, the most beautiful women are often the bravest ones. And rule number 3, when you find your perfect match, hold on tight and never let go. Those are much better rules, Coco agreed, sealing their new beginning with a kiss that tasted like promise and possibility and forever. Oh my beautiful viewers, what a journey this has been. From Danny's rigid rules to Coco's secret mission. From heartbreak to healing, from fear to the kind of love that transforms everything. This story has taken us through every emotion possible. Thank you for being here with me through every twist, every turn, every moment of suspense and every sigh of relief. Stories like this remind us that love really can conquer all, that people can change and grow, and that sometimes the greatest risks lead to the greatest rewards. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a love story. Drop a comment below and let me know which part made you cry, which part made you cheer, and what you want to see in our next romantic adventure together. And remember, beautiful souls, in your own love story, don't let fear write the rules. Let love lead the way. Until our next story, keep believing in happily ever after.